Hi everyone, and welcome to EB Speaks. My name is Ibinabo Enebi. So this October, I'm looking to do a series that I would call Living Well in Your Golden Years and Beyond. So last week, I had a guest, Dr. Debbie Maduka, who spoke about autoimmune disorders, the causes, symptoms, and management. Today, I have a very special guest, Brenda O'Keeffe, and we're going to be talking about learning how to look after your mental health. So, Brenda, I'm delighted that you're here. Thank you so much for coming on EB Speaks today.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah. So, October 10th, which is tomorrow, is the World Mental Health Day. And, you know, like I said in my introduction, I wanted to do something for older people for the month of October. Like even generally speaking, as we go older in life, we come across a lot of things, you know what I mean? Like a lot of transitions and life changes. So I thought that it would be very good to have something to talk about mental health, you know, situations for older people.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, I think at every age in life, we're subject to stressors in life.
Yeah.
But I think with old age, there can be specific stressors that I suppose if people are aware of them, they have more of a chance of addressing them.
Oh my goodness. You know what? I just like the way you have said that if people are aware of them, aware of the stressors, then they'll be well able to deal with them. But before we go into the conversation proper, the reason why we're having this conversation is that for everyone who's listening, I would like that at the end of today, they will be able to understand their stressors and know how to manage their conditions better. I think that is the takeaway from this conversation we're going to have. Yeah?
Yeah, we can certainly try to get a few points across. Yeah, it's some general points definitely that will apply in general to most people. Obviously, you know, I would always say if there are people, and I suppose one of the key points in dealing with your mental health is the ability to ask for help. And that would go beyond even this forum here. If, you know, if necessary, prevention is always better than cure. But if you're looking, if somebody were to view this and, you know, they have like a mental health condition that's debilitating, that's stopping them from living their life and enjoying their life, the best thing often to do is to go and get one-to-one help. So, you know, any advice that I give, I would give with that precursor.
Yes, to go get help. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tomorrow is World Mental Health Day. And in your own opinion, why do you think that having a day like tomorrow is important, especially now?
Well, I suppose when you ask me that question, the first things that come to mind are one, stigma, you know, mental health for a long time. And there is still stigma about mental health. You know, don't be under any impression that there isn't. It is still much easier to talk about a physical ailment than it is to talk about a mental health ailment. It is improving, but there is a long way to go. So that's, I suppose, you know, it's raising awareness of mental health. The other thing I think is we have a tendency to separate mental health from physical health, you know, and even historically, mental health hospitals like psychiatric hospitals were separate hospitals from general hospitals. And it's only now people are starting to accept that our mental and our physical health are all the same.
Yeah.
If our mental health goes, now I didn't hear last week's speaker, but I'm sure when she spoke about autoimmune diseases, if your mental health goes and your nervous system is constantly producing these stress chemicals, that's you know, they don't just flow up here. They
Hmm.
flow everywhere. So that's going to take a toll on a person's body. And likewise, if somebody is neglecting their physical health, be they, lifestyle, poor lifestyle choices like substance abuse, or even
Yeah.
or even poor diet, that likewise has just the same impact on your physical health. I read somewhere recently that people with chronic mental health illnesses, and when I say chronic, I mean people who suffer with depression and anxiety, kind of they struggle throughout their lives with it. They're they're in general their death comes 15 to 20 years earlier. Like,
Really?
men- yeah, mental health can take that amount of time off your life. They die younger. And for some reason, that's a fact that's not really acknowledged. It's not thrown about that much. Um, so poor mental health is you can't have without mental health, you have no health.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I
I have to write it down really. Without mental health,
you have no health.
you have no health.
No.
From what I hear you say, it means that our physical health, our emotional health, all takes its toll on our mental health, and that the mental health is the center of our well-being in general.
Yeah, our minds and the well-being of our mind. Our minds are our driving force. They're our center of cognition. The mind is the center of cognition. In the front part up here of the cortex is how we do our planning, our thinking, our organizing. Further back is our emotion centers, our feelings, our emotions. It's our survival center, and that's so that is the driving force for all of our body. So when that's
And
not right,
yeah,
and that's, I suppose, some theory, but and I'm not a doctor, and I don't claim to be, and I don't have the facts that I don't have the depth of facts that someone else might have, but the nervous system, which is the nerves that connect the brain to the rest of the body, and the messages run up and down, and the chemicals, particularly the the fight and flight chemicals.
yeah,
So if we're scared, for example, if we get a fright, the oxygen flows away from our brains
mm,
into our limbs, and the blood flows into our limbs, and our heart beats faster, and we start to sweat so that we can we can run, or we
yeah.
can fight to survive. And those chemicals are very powerful. And normally, when the fright is over, our nervous system returns to a state of rest. And we can take a deep breath, and we can reflect on what's happened to us. But for some people, if there is enough of those chemicals, or if there was enough of those frights when they were younger, maybe a traumatic incident, the nervous system stays on alert, and it's
Okay.
constantly looking for threats. And all those chemicals, then they lead to a lot of, they lead to heart disease, they lead to the autoimmune diseases that your last guest would have spoken about.
Fantastic. You have a BSc in counseling and psychotherapy,
Yes.
and you're currently working with the Horizon Medical Mental Health Center clinic in Limerick.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, this is not to be nosy, but based on your experience, what is the most common kind of conditions that you encounter that older people have?
Well, I should probably say first the conditions, the things that people who come for therapy, the condition that's most prevalent that I find, the common factor between anxiety and depression, but the common factor is people's relationships, I think.
Okay.
And that can be a relationship with other people, but a lot of the time it's the relationship they have with themselves.
Okay.
And if you have a poor relationship with yourself, that's going to have a negative impact on every part of your life. So a lot of the time when people come to therapy, regardless of their age, I come across an awful lot of inner critics, people talking to themselves like they wouldn't talk to their friend or their daughter or their mother. And I think that is the case regardless of the age. But I suppose to get specific to the older people, I think older people, they face challenges that younger people don't. And predominantly that can be failing physical health,
Yeah.
and their agility is reducing maybe, and there might be some acceptance work around what they can't change, this thing, change the things that you can and accept the things that you can't change. And it's about having the wisdom to know the difference of what you can work with and what you can't work with. And also then there is people's, around the time of retirement, people, their financial status might change. They might have reduced income. That has an impact on life. A reduced social status, their purpose in life might have been very much tied up with a workplace. That's gone. Sometimes when children grow up and move on and set up on their own lives, the sense of purpose, predominantly for women, maybe might reduce. And people of a certain age, they're going to face more bereavement as well.
Yeah.
They're going to have friends die and pass on, and they're going to have family members. So there, I suppose it's those issues in latter life that you mightn't necessarily get in middle life or younger life.
Yeah, that's what I pictured, that there's a lot of transitions that go on when we get to our 50s and beyond, and they kind of like, bombard our state of mind. And I think that you have captured exactly what I had in mind. So for someone who's listening, how would you know, listen, I'm worrying, but the worrying is getting excessive. I'm anxious and my anxiety is getting excessive and things like that.
Well, I suppose another thing about mental health is that it's hard to measure.
Okay.
There isn't an exact measure. You can't say someone they're in great mental health, whereas they're not, because it's quite subjective.
Okay.
There's a lot of, we need to judge ourselves. But I suppose a good way to start is to look at what good mental health is.
Yeah.
And good mental health is it's feeling well, it's functioning well, and it's also been able to cope with the normal ups and downs of life, the normal frustrations and traffic jams, that you can.
I know.
But that it's not going to throw you completely off the edge.
Yeah.
It's about having it's about feeling good about oneself. It's about being able to go out and meet people and engage with people. So there's everyone's idea of what good mental health could be slightly different, but I think it's about a general sense of functioning well. And then the flip side of that, and it's about eating well and sleeping well. And the flip side of that then is, and it's often the telltale signs can often be those basics that we need to survive. Good sleep, good diet. Another thing of good mental health is what they call kind of balanced thinking.
Balanced thinking.
Yeah. Being able to see two sides of the story, being able to see that you might have messed up, but it's not that bad. So not always blaming yourself. Whereas if you're thinking it's very negative, well, then you're only going to see the negative and you're only going to think the negative, which is very much then where that inner critic, if you have a very strong inner critic that is always, if you have a voice in your head that's always criticizing you, you know, saying, God, you're stupid, you shouldn't have done that. Look, you did that again. They're all think you're a fool. You are a fool. If you have that kind of a voice going on in your head for any length of time, well, that's not going to do you any favors. So, yeah, so I would say negative thinking would be a big
The
one.
number one.
And interest in life, a general, you know, do you want to get out of bed in the morning? I know we'll all have mornings where the weather might be miserable and you don't necessarily want to get out of bed, but it's on the law of averages. Do you want to get out of bed most of the time? So again, it's kind of subjective, Ebi. I can't give you a list of what constitutes bad mental health, but just the feeling of things not being right and
not being able to function.
Yeah, and not being able to function well, not feeling well. And unfortunately, and this kind of nearly bring us back to World Mental Health Day and why we have it. Unfortunately, some people, when their mood tends to slip and their thinking starts to become quite negative, rather than ask for help, they kind of think, oh, well, this is evidence that there's shame. There can be shame involved in asking for help, you know.
Well, Brenda, that's the thing that I hear you say,
okay,
which is very, you know, it's like a light bulb has just switched on in my brain. And a lot of us don't think it like that. But negative self-thinking, I think, self-blame and negative self-thinking, I think, is something that drives a lot of us, especially as we go older. Things I should have done, things I shouldn't have done. I wish I did this. I wish I didn't do that. So that, you would say, is one of the triggers, is it?
It's certainly, sometimes it's something that people learn in childhood, you know.
Okay.
If they don't have we're going into a whole other area now here, but if they don't have, we're going from the older back to the younger, but it's
yeah, but then it has to, we have to do it because that's the root cause.
Yeah. So young children, if they're very secure in their relationship with their primary caregiver, if all their needs are met, and I don't mean now, and this is for parents because I'm a parent and I certainly didn't meet all my children's needs all the time, but again, it's kind of down to the 80% of the time a child's needs are met. They in turn then develop the ability to meet their own needs. One of those needs is the ability to self-soothe, nurture, because that's what we do with small children. We soothe them and we nurture them without even realizing that, in the hope that they in turn then be able to, they learn how to self-soothe and self-nurture themselves throughout the difficulties of life, because life is difficult, you know. Yeah. That's a fact, and it's wonderful, but it's equally difficult. So it's getting through that, and a lot of it has to come from within us. And if we have the ability to self-soothe, know our shortcomings, but accept and forgive ourselves for them. And a lot of us were very quick to know our shortcomings, but not as quick to look at the good things about ourselves. So if we can kind of stand back and look at ourselves objectively and have a growing awareness, and, you know, without us ever doing anything, if we could have a value on ourselves as a human being who has, and each of us has as much value and right to be on this planet as the next. If you can develop that as a core belief, makes the rest of it so much easier. And it reduces the likelihood that this inner critic, who can have a voice that you would never voice to another human being. If you think of the things that you could say to yourself, you wouldn't say it to a loved one.
You know what I learned? I learned to, for myself, right? I learned to accept praise.
Yeah.
I learned to enjoy the things that I do right. I learned that a few years ago.
Okay.
Because sometimes, I don't know, but sometimes people find it easier to accept criticism, and they say, well, I was criticized for this and that. They allow themselves to soak in the criticisms, but then they don't like to enjoy, accept praise, receive it to say, I deserve it.
Mm-hmm. I've earned it.
Yes, I earned it. I deserve it. So I have learned to accept praise and to enjoy, bask in my success. Well, for a little, not too much, bask in it and then move on to do other things. And I think that has helped me.
And that spurs you on then. And
yes.
Isn't it great that you can take that validation from yourself?
Yeah, validate, yeah.
Looking externally for it and maybe not getting it. It's the ability to get the acceptance, the value, and the validation, the most of it from yourself, because you can't rely, it won't necessarily come outside. And I think that's leaving the elderly people and coming back to the younger people and our social media world and people looking externally for validation is detrimental. And we do need some external validation because we're social beings and we interact and we need feedback from our parents and from our loved ones. But we need to take the most of it from ourselves.
From ourselves, yes.
Yeah. We need to be producing this stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I believe you. Absolutely. I absolutely believe you. Now, Brenda, I'm going to say this now. For those of us who are joining me, we're talking about looking after your mental health, as we grow older. And from what you're saying, that there is a connection with a healthy childhood, relationship with your family, with your parents, or with your primary caregiver, that how well you were cared for as a young person reflects in your older years. Yeah?
There is, but I should just say there, that you can, if you haven't got that in childhood, and nobody's childhood was perfect, mine certainly wasn't. And there was nothing wrong with it either. It was good, I had good, loving, parents with flaws, and
they're always flawed, yeah.
But you can correct if you don't grow up with that secure attachment, you can. And I suppose, and this is often where therapy comes in, you can learn to create that for yourself.
Exactly. Now that's where I'm going to. Okay. Now, in your profile, I'm going to read out what you do, and then I want us to talk about it and talk through it in the different instances, because we want to talk about solutions now. Yeah. So your therapeutic approach is grounded in humanistic therapy and incorporates aspects of cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, in addition to compassion-focused therapy. And you know what, Brenda? I absolutely love it.
Okay. Well,
I absolutely love it. So what I want us to do now is I want to read something else that you said about you. You said your humanistic therapy focuses on the person's self worth and values.
Yeah.
Being valued as a person without being judged can help an individual to accept who they are and reconnect with themselves. So I want us to take a look at these approaches one by one and how we can apply them to our lives.
Okay. I suppose we've touched a little bit already on self-worth.
Yes.
And value, and you know how it has to come from within us. And this is where it comes back to awareness. If you're not aware that you have this inner critic in your head all the time, if you think that's just normal, this is, you know, and for some people, they may never look for therapy or for help, and they'll live with this. And a lot of people then, you know, they use substance to numb the pain. So yeah, therapy is one part of it. And certainly I would say, you know, if someone is living with, they don't even need to be distressed, but if someone has an issue, therapy, a mental health issue, a thinking issue, a behavior an issue, or is overwhelmed with strong feelings, you know, like anxiety, or they have relationship problems, then certainly therapy is a good starting point. With therapy, then you mightn't, you know, finding the right therapist is a thing. I would be very much, as I said, humanistic. I think when someone comes to me for therapy, my initial goal is to create a relationship of acceptance and trust, where a person feels they can speak without being judged. And I always say to people, you know, give it maybe 2 or 3 sessions, and if it doesn't fit, I'm not the right therapist for you. And that's no reflection on me, or it's no reflection on the client. It's just different people. But I suppose to go back to a more general, the more general topic of how someone at home can build better mental health. At any age, but particularly when they're older, is, I would say, the first thing is connections. And
I have to write that down.
Okay.
Because we say that all the time, but we never understand the value of it.
Well, some of the earlier things I mentioned, you know, like the change in social status, or the change in income, or reduced physical health, or suffering from bereavements, they can leave people feeling isolated and lonely. And that loneliness is a common topic that people would, particularly older people. And I suppose it's quite relevant now with coming out of this pandemic. People have felt lonely and isolated. So to maintain relationships and connections, and I suppose we come back to the relationship with ourselves first and foremost, which is where you know, it's one of the topics that you mentioned that one of the therapeutic approaches I kind of lean on sometimes is compassion focused therapy. It's a kind of a relatively new behavioral type therapy, and it quite simply just focuses on us being compassionate and kind to ourselves. Very straightforward, but it can have compassion has been shown to change our neural pathways.
Neural what?
Our neural pathways, our neural connections. So that our automatic thoughts change.
Really?
Yeah. There's a guy called Paul Gilbert, I think, if you wanted to look it up, if anyone was interested in looking further into it. Paul Gilbert has done a lot of work on compassion and how it changes the brain.
Really?
Yeah. I suppose if somebody is consistently abused, if you take a child or an adult, in a particularly just a different, like in we'll say a prison setting, or even an abusive relationship, if somebody is consistently abused and spoken down to, it changes how they think. It changes how they think about themselves. It changes how they react to the world, respond to the world. And conversely, if you learn to speak compassionately and kindly to yourself, in time, that also changes your
Fantastic.
the neural. Our brains are very plastic. There's neuroplasticity. I don't want to get too far into this now, because I don't want to be talking about things that I mightn't have all the facts on. But yes, compassion and neuroscience are certainly an area to keep an eye on. So again, the relationships are very important. And it can be hard to say to somebody, work on your relationships or spend more time with people, because not everyone might have the access to people who live alone. I remember somebody saying to me one time, for somebody else, it was a woman who was suffering with depression. She was recovering from depression, and she was advised to go to the shops every day rather than doing a weekly grocery shop. Do a daily grocery shop. So it meant she was going to the butcher's, and she was going to the grocer, and she was going to a fruit and veg shop every day, and she was talking to those people. It's those little things that can make a
difference. Yes. So, guys, if you're just tuning in, my special guest today is Brenda O'Keeffe, and we're talking about learning how to thrive with your mental health in your older years. And if you have any questions, kindly feel free to leave your questions or your comments in the comment section below. And if you're watching via YouTube, please like this video and share it. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. So, Brenda, we talked about relationships and making connections. Paramount to that is having a good relationship with yourself and being compassionate, to yourself. Now, assuming I live alone and I do not have any social connections, the example that you gave about the lady who goes out every day to do her shopping is a very good way to have to talk to people. Yeah.
And it that sense of isolation. It might be just a few words across a counter, but the more you go to the same shop, a relationship will even build with the shopkeeper,
Yeah.
Obviously, then you can expand on that. Another, I have a couple of tips, like for general good mental health, contributing to society.
Okay. Write that down.
Volunteering. Volunteering is a bit of a commitment, but certainly, there's plenty of charities out there. You look up a charity website, you find what's in your area, something may appeal to you. Other than that, it's just contributing. It might be random acts of kindness, in your community. This, a random act of kindness makes you feel good about yourself, which in turn helps to reduce negative emotions. It's a kind of a balancing out. And then we're back to exercise. You know, we're back to the
Okay.
physical part, the mind-body connection. We need exercise. We need to be out in nature somewhat. We need fresh air. They're basic and they're obvious, but they're essential. I know
Wow.
that there are GPs in Britain at the moment who are writing prescriptions for daily walks. They're no longer just telling people to go for a walk, get out in the fresh air, because people have stopped listening to that. So rather than, you know, before you get it, maybe if everyone who went to the doctor wanted an antibiotic because if they didn't get the antibiotic, you know, it wasn't worth their while. So rather than writing a script for an antibiotic, they're writing it on a piece of paper. This is
Really?
yeah.
Daily walks as a prescription.
Go for a walk, whatever it might be. And people then, because they have the piece of paper, they're kind of paying it more heed and they're thinking, well, maybe I really need to do this. Staying on the physical, then we have food and drink.
Okay.
So whatever you put into your body is going to affect your mental health. Too much alcohol, the usual list of suspects.
And what are they?
Sugar, white carbs. And you know, and we all like, or most of us, I know I like a bar of chocolate, but
Oh, that's me. I like white chocolate.
there you go. That's even more sugar in the white chocolate. Yeah. So yeah, those things you need if you're going to have a well-balanced mind and body. You need to look after both mind and body. You can't have good mental health if your physical health is shattered. You can't have good physical health if your mental health is.
Mental health. So
Yeah.
they're all interwoven, yeah.
We're all interwoven, very much so. Gratitude is another thing that's high on the list for mental well-being. Even on the days when things haven't gone too well, or you're feeling low, and you know, just to find a couple of things you're grateful for. Might be a cozy bed, you know, might be that bar of chocolate. And I think another thing, and it's something that probably before we were always taught, you know, be positive, and you know, and you have so much to be grateful for. And I think it's important to acknowledge that life can be difficult and we can have very difficult emotions. And sometimes it's just about accepting those difficult emotions and making a bit of room for them. That's where the acceptance and commitment therapy comes in, that you got to accept that it's not always going to be rosy.
Yeah, that's like the lemonades. That's the lemons. When life throws you lemons, you make lemonades of.
Yeah, you just, like I said, life is difficult. It's more difficult for some people than others. And it doesn't help those people to tell them, you know, you have it good, keep going. What have you got to be sad about? They may have something to be sad about. And it's allowing time for sadness, despair, and if you allow those emotions into your life rather than struggle to remove them, chances are they'll come and go a lot easier without struggle.
Really?
Well, it's yeah. You know, struggling and fighting with emotions that you want gone. You're only fighting with yourself. If you allow them to be there, you can even turn your attention towards other things. Yeah, we can't be happy all the time.
Yeah. So I remember when I lost my dad, or when I lost my parents, my dad, and then my son.
You lost your son?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't
It's
know that.
it's okay. It's okay.
I'm sorry that
Um,
happened to you.
yeah, that was 2015.
That's very difficult, Evie.
Yes, it was. But it's okay. You
Oh,
know, those moments were very difficult.
I can imagine. I can't
You
even
know,
imagine, but
they were very, very difficult. And my mother was the first person to die. She died in 2002. Yeah, it was tough. When I lost my dad, I thought I was going to die. You know, but the thing is, like you said, is that sometimes you just have to cry. And I think it's not right for people to say to someone that is sad, oh, don't cry, oh, don't cry. You know, I think that allow people to grieve, to cry,
mhm,
to get it out of their system.
mhm. To
Yeah.
go through
Yeah.
it.
To go through the process of grieving. And then when they're done, then they can move forward. But then the fear is, will they stay there for a long time? Yeah.
With grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose you always carry it, don't you? You just learn to carry it.
Yeah. You just learn to carry it. Yeah.
Mm.
Just learn to carry it.
No,
Now, what about, so we've talked about commitment and acceptance. We've talked about compassion-based, focused. We talked about relationships. What about the cognitive behavioral therapy?
but I suppose the cognitive behavioral therapy came first with you know the whole evolution of psychotherapy started with Freud and the psychoanalysis, and it moved on then to Carl Rogers and his humanistic therapy, which um, I think is kind of a good basis for all therapy because it speaks about congruence on the part of the therapist being happy, kind of accepting in their own skin and being honest in how they project themselves. They talk about the core conditions are congruence, acceptance of the person in front of you and their life. Unconditional acceptance is the word, actually. You know, that you accept this person with whatever they bring to the room unconditionally, and without judgment. You don't judge. So that was the humanistic um, therapists. And they've built on that since then. And cognitive behavioral therapy came in the 50s.
Okay.
What it does is it looks at how your thoughts affect your feelings and how your feelings affect your behavior. So, you know, and it with and our CBT, it's, you know, there is loads of research. It's a very effective therapy. There's no doubt about it. Um, and what, you know, a lot of it is it's comes back to that inner critic, and you know, you're asking somebody to pick a negative thought and then to question it, you know, and a lot of people have these automatic negative thoughts that they bring with them from childhood, like they're not good enough, they're ugly, they don't fit in, things like that, you know, the messages that they receive subliminally, and it's kind of thoughts that are dug into their very being. And with CBT, you try to find evidence for those thoughts. It's almost like a court sitting, you know, show me the evidence that this is true, and you break them down like that, and that in turn makes the feelings a little easier and the behavior. So, and that was predominant for years and years and years. CBT, you know, it was a bit of a buzzword, cognitive therapy. And in more recent times, then what I mentioned, the acceptance and commitment therapy and the compassion focused therapy, they're very much behavioral therapies as well. They're cognitive behavioral therapy too, but they just evolved to bring in things like mindfulness and meditation, acceptance and kind of values, they made the whole behavioural therapy a little bit more compassionate. They broadened it to just be able to bring in other threads.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I like the add-ons. I like the compassion. I like the acceptance, because, and I come back to it a lot, and sometimes life is shit, you know,
Stressful, yeah.
and that you've got to work with that.
Yeah.
It's very real. You know, you've been through difficult times in your life. There's no glossing over that. That is what it is. So I think there's an allowance for that. And with the acceptance and commitment therapy, again, it's not about contradicting your thoughts, because sometimes your negative thoughts are true, you know. So it's about learning to sit with them more than changing them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about sitting with it and knowing that it's there. Okay, so this thing has happened. A few weeks ago, I had a coach, he happens to be my husband, talk about dealing with setbacks. Okay. And one of the ways that he said was accept what has happened. Okay, so my dog died, my cow died, my cat died, I lost a job, accept it. Okay, and then think about how you're going to go on from there, because not accepting it means you're fighting with yourself.
You are, and you're stuck back there. When your cow dog died or your dog died, you're stuck back there, and you haven't moved on and
dealt with it. Yeah. Okay. Now, what about? I was going to what genders or what gender is more genetically disposed to anxiety? Stress?
I don't have an answer to that now, Evie. I think historically women have been better at coming forward to talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
Starting to change. I think more men in the media are coming out now. But I suppose looking at like mental being unwell and what causes it, it's for a long time they thought mental illness was just a biological factor. It was in your genes and that was it, you know, and you were born and you were going to get it. But now they realize that it's threefold.
Okay.
There is a biological predisposition to it. There are social factors like lower socioeconomic groups or people living in deprived areas have tougher lives, and as a result they're going to have higher rates of depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And the other thing then is psychological. It's what's in yourself, not necessarily what you're born with, but what you developed, your personality type, your resilience, your IQ, maybe your just how you deal with emotions. And so it's threefold. It's what you came into the world with, it's what develops within you while you're here, and it's what's happening outside you. It's called the biological, psychological, social model, and that can be applied to physical illness as well. You know, someone who's like social, someone who smokes 40 fags a day is going to have more of a chance of getting lung cancer than the person who doesn't. And the person who's smoking 40 fags a day might be living in a deprived area with no jobs and no prospects. So all of life spits. It's a melting pot, really.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, assuming there is a lady who is in her 50s or 60s or thereabout and has gone through transitions, challenges, and as a therapist, what would you say to her?
And how is she presenting as such?
She's just there going through life. The children are all left home. Okay. She's retired. and she's looking for where all the time has gone.
Yeah, let's say, depression comes from looking back.
Okay, I'll have to write this down. Okay, I'm listening.
So depression is about looking back and living in the past and lamenting, losses and old mistakes or what could have been. Anxiety comes from living in the future, worrying about, the ifs and the buts and what if, and, just excessive worrying. Which brings us back to the present. So really it's about trying to live in the present. Focusing on every day, and like the things I said about making connections with other people, getting out daily for exercise, good diet, contributing. There's another thing, it's called creating a flow. It's finding an activity that, when you're doing something and you lose track of time, something that you enjoy, a hobby. It's called creating a flow. When you're in a flow, be it jigsaw making or walking or cooking or whatever it is that creates your flow, that you kind of enjoy to the extent that you just lose track of time. That's good. And and a lot of people don't like to do it, but I always say that the meditation and those little meditation apps or things on YouTube, they're very good for bringing people into the present, out of the past and out of the future. And it's in the present that you can develop kind of the self-worth and the value that I think will give you the bit of joy to take you through life,
Fantastic. It's in the present that you would, be able to connect with the joys that would give you peace of mind for the future. So depression is looking back at the past. Anxiety is focusing too much in the future, the ifs, thoughts, and worry. And being present is what would help you. But what if the present is
difficult?
It's not something you want to think about. How would you?
Just then distraction, it's again, it comes down to there are certain things in life that you can't change, things that are outside of your control. It's knowing what they are versus knowing what you can change. There's a thing, it's give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's good.
Fantastic. That's what my husband always tells me.
There, he's a wise man then.
Brenda, I want to take this comment. 1 hour is gone already. Someone says, thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Ibi, for all of this episode has been able to offer. To a very large extent, how I have been able to cope is based on spiritual practices cutting across various cultures. So this one talks about our own spiritual practices. It could be prayer, it could be listening to spiritual music and all those kind of things.
I had that, spirituality or faith is another wonderful.
Yeah.
It's another wonderful pathway to peace of mind.
Fantastic. So if you're watching me, and you like this video and you like this discussion, I would like you to please like this video and share it. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Ibinabo Enebi. Now, Brenda, I want to say a huge thank you for today.
My pleasure.
It is fantastic. I want to thank you so much for taking a chance on me.
No, it was, I've enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
Yeah. Yes. And so, guys, Brenda works with the Horizon Mental Health Clinic in Limerick.
Yes.
And if you want to, or you feel that you need to talk to her, then you can contact her, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're doing a very fantastic job there. I got someone who spoke to you that felt that you've done a fantastic job. She's the one who asked me, go and talk to Brenda. Brenda would do a very good job. And I'm not disappointed.
That's good.
So thank you.
I
thought
I wouldn't have enough to talk about, but
I told you we were just going to chill.
Yeah. It's been great, Ibi. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. So guys, next week I would have another conversation. And like I said earlier on, the month of October is talking about looking after ourselves in our golden years and beyond. And so next week I have a guest who's going to talk about financial planning, and you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. And I have an article about retirement. I have a guest contributor that spoke about his experiences in retirement, on retirement, and it's on my One Womanity website. It's onewomanity.com. You can check it out there. And so, Brenda, I'm going to call you. And okay. Guys, everyone, for joining me today. I had a wonderful time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Brenda. Yes. Bye.